The cold metal walls of the ancient space station gleamed under the lights of Commander HFY's ship. 300 years had passed since anyone had seen such a place. The station drifted in the empty space around a dead star, its hull marked with symbols that made every alien in the galaxy nervous. Human symbols. HFY floated through the airlock, his breathing mask hissing softly in the thin air. The Vorthak commander had seen many old stations before, but this one felt different. The corridors were built for creatures that walked on two legs with strange proportions that seemed both familiar and alien at the same time. Everything was quiet, too quiet for a station that should have been screaming warnings about forbidden territory. The Galactic Council had been very clear about their rules. Any structure, any artifact, any trace of the humans was to be reported immediately and left alone. No one was allowed to investigate. No one was allowed to board. No one was allowed to even look too closely. But scientific curiosity had always been HFY's weakness, and the readings from this station were too strange to ignore. His scanner beeped softly as he moved deeper into the station. The power was still running somehow, fed by energy sources that his instruments could not identify. The walls were covered in markings that looked like writing, but in a language that had been banned from all databases 3 centuries ago. English. The humans had called it. HFY found what he was looking for in the central command center. Banks of computers lined the walls, their screens dark, but still humming with power. He activated his translation device, hoping it still contained the forbidden language files that all council ships were supposed to delete. The screen flickered to life and words appeared that made his heart race with fear and excitement. Captain Jake Morrison, personal log, Earth Defense Fleet, Day 2847 of the war. The video file opened, and HFY found himself staring at a creature he had only seen in secret historical records. The human was tall and lean, with pale skin and dark hair that was cut short in military fashion. His eyes were the color of Earth's sky, a blue that no other species in the galaxy possessed. But what struck HFY most was the expression on the human's face. It was tired but not defeated, determined but not angry. It was the face of someone who had seen terrible things, but still believed in something better. Morrison spoke in his strange language, and the translation device worked to convert his words. "We are losing this war, but we are not giving up. The Devourers have taken 17 more systems in the past month. Our weapons barely slow them down, and our shields might as well be made of paper. But we have a plan, and if it works, we might save not just ourselves but everyone in this galaxy." HFY paused the recording and looked around the empty command center, the Devourers. Even 3 centuries later, that name made every alien species shudder with fear. They had been massive creatures that existed beyond normal space, consuming entire solar systems not just for their matter and energy, but for something deeper. Life itself. Memory itself. When the Devourers finished with a world, it was as if that world had never existed at all. The recording continued, and Morrison's voice grew more urgent. "Project Exodus is ready. We are taking the entire human fleet beyond the galaxy's edge, into the spaces between realities where these creatures come from. We do not know if we will survive, and we do not know if we will ever return. But if we can learn how these things work, if we can find their weakness, then maybe we can stop them before they consume everything we love." Morrison paused and looked directly at the camera, as if he could see through time to the alien commander who would eventually watch this recording. "We know the other species fear us. We know they think we are too violent, too unpredictable, too quick to fight. Maybe they are right. But when something threatens the weak, when something hunts the innocent, humans do not run away. We run toward the danger. We put ourselves between the predator and its prey. That is who we are, and that is who we will always be." The recording flickered, and Morrison's image began to fade. "If anyone finds this message, remember that we chose to leave. We were not defeated, we were not destroyed, and we were not driven away. We chose to take this fight to the enemy's home ground because that was the only way to protect everyone else. Do not mourn us. Do not fear us. Just remember that humans keep their promises, and we promise to protect this galaxy. Someday, somehow, we will keep that promise. The screen went dark, leaving Zexhai alone in the silent command center. His hands shook as he copied the recording to his personal storage device. This was information that the Council needed to know, even if it terrified them. For 300 years, the galaxy had lived in peace, believing that the humans were gone forever. But if Morrison was telling the truth, they were not gone. They were just fighting a war in places that normal minds could not imagine. Zexhai made his way back to his ship, his mind racing with possibilities. What if the humans were still alive out there, beyond the edge of known space? What if they were still fighting the Devourers in dimensions that existed outside normal reality? And most terrifying of all, what if they were winning? He activated his communication system and sent an encrypted message to the Galactic Council headquarters on Centralis Prime. The message was simple, but would send shockwaves through every government in the galaxy. Human artifact discovered. Active data recovered. Request immediate Council emergency session. Classification level. Maximum threat. As his ship pulled away from the ancient station, Zexhai took one last look at the human symbols on its hull. For 3 centuries, the aliens had told themselves that humans were gone forever, that the galaxy was safer without them. But now he wondered if safety had been an illusion. The humans had not run away from the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. They had run toward it, carrying the fight to the enemy's home ground in a war that had lasted for hundreds of years. If the humans were coming back, it meant one of 2 things. Either they had won their impossible war against creatures that consumed reality itself, or something even worse than the Devourers was coming to the galaxy. Either way, the peaceful years were about to end, and every species in the galaxy would have to decide whether the humans were their salvation or their greatest fear. The dead star grew smaller behind his ship, but Zexhai knew that the message, hidden in that ancient station, would change everything. The humans were out there somewhere, fighting battles that no other species could fight, protecting a galaxy that had forgotten their sacrifice. Soon, everyone would remember why the aliens still feared the day humanity returns. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of receiving Zexhai's message. Representatives from all 12 major species gathered in the Great Chamber on Centralis Prime, their faces showing fear that had not been seen for 3 centuries. The holographic display in the center of the room showed Morrison's final message, his human features stark against the darkness of space. Elder Kithara of the Selenites was the first to speak, her crystalline form shimmering with nervous energy. The recording confirms what our oldest archives suggested, but what we hoped was never true. The humans did not disappear because they were defeated. They chose to leave, and they chose to fight a war that we could not even imagine. The Thornak, Representative General Vexthor, slammed his clawed fist on the table. This changes nothing. The humans are gone, have been gone for 300 years. Even if some of them still live, they are no longer our concern. We have built our own peace, our own strength. We do not need their protection anymore. But Admiral Quindar of the Zentari Defense Force shook his head slowly. You speak like someone who never lived during the human years, General. I am old enough to remember when they walked among us. You have no idea what we lost when they left. The chamber fell silent as Quindar activated his personal memory projector. The air above the council table shimmered, and suddenly they were looking at scenes from centuries past. A human woman in a blue uniform stood on the bridge of a massive starship, her brown hair pulled back in a simple style that somehow made her look both professional and approachable at the same time. That is Admiral Lisa Carter of the Earth Defense Fleet, Quindar said quietly. She established the first human colonies beyond their home system, but not in the way other species expand. The humans never conquered. They never demanded tribute. They never forced their culture on others. They simply offered protection to anyone who needed it. The memory shifted to show Carter's fleet arriving at a Zentari colony world that was under attack by space pirates. The human ships did not demand payment or negotiation. They simply eliminated the threat with precision that left the pirates destroyed, but the colony completely unharmed. When the grateful Zentari offered them resources and territory, Carter politely refused, saying that friends did not charge friends for help. Another memory appeared, showing a human man in combat armor walking calmly through a war zone. This is General Marcus Webb during the Cretan Rebellion, Quindar continued. The Cretan had been fighting a civil war for decades, tearing their homeworld apart. Other species tried to mediate, tried to impose peace through superior firepower or complex treaties. The humans tried something different. The scene showed Webb and a small team of human soldiers laying down their weapons and walking unarmed into a Cretan rebel stronghold. The rebels surrounded them, weapons raised, but Webb simply began to talk. He spoke about loss, about fear, about the pain of watching your world destroy itself. He talked about hope, about building something better for the children who would inherit whatever was left of their world. Within a day, the rebel leaders were meeting with government representatives in the same room where they had planned to execute the human general. Webb had not threatened them or bribed them. He had simply shown them that someone from another species cared enough about their suffering to risk his life walking into their guns. The Civil War ended not with victory or defeat, but with both sides choosing to build peace because a human had believed they were capable of it. Dr. Zalthek of the Corvin Institute raised a tentacle nervously, but surely their military reputation was exaggerated. The stories of human combat effectiveness were always difficult to believe. Quindar's expression grew grim. The stories were not exaggerated. If anything, they were understated. The humans were the most effective military force the galaxy had ever seen, not because of superior technology or numbers, but because of their psychology. Watch this. The memory. Projector showed a human woman in a white coat standing in a laboratory filled with alien artifacts. This is Dr. Elena Rodriguez, humanity's chief xenobiologist. She made first contact with 17 different species, and every single encounter followed the same pattern. Instead of approaching with suspicion or superiority, she approached with scientific curiosity and genuine respect. The scene shifted to show Rodriguez's first meeting with the insectoid hive tar species. While other first contact teams brought weapons and translators, Rodriguez brought gifts of art and music from dozens of different human cultures. She spent weeks learning hive tar social customs, not to manipulate them, but because she found their society genuinely fascinating. When the hive tar finally agreed to meet with other human representatives, they specifically requested that all negotiations include Dr. Rodriguez. They had never encountered a species that studied them not as potential threats or resources, but as fellow intelligent beings worthy of respect and understanding. Elder Kithara's crystalline body pulsed with soft light. I remember Dr. Rodriguez. She visited our homeworld many times, always asking questions about our culture and history. She learned to speak our language better than some of our own children. When she published her studies of Selenite society, she focused not on our weaknesses or resources, but on the beauty of our philosophical traditions. The memories continued, showing human diplomats, traders, explorers, and scientists. Captain Roy Thompson of the merchant vessel New Horizon maintained trade relationships with 47 different worlds, but his cargo holds contained more than just goods. He carried letters between separated families, transported refugees from disasters, and delivered medical supplies to worlds that could not afford them. Dr. Nathan Brooks, humanities expert on alien psychology, had identified something that no other species had noticed. Every intelligent species in the galaxy fell into predictable patterns. They were either naturally aggressive, naturally passive, or naturally isolationist. The Thornak conquered through strength. The Selenites avoided conflict through wisdom. The Zentari maintained order through discipline, but humans were different. They could be peaceful diplomats in the morning and fierce warriors in the evening. They could show mercy to defeated enemies and then fight to the death to protect strangers. They were protective of the weak while respecting the strong. Most importantly, they could understand and communicate with species whose motivations were completely alien to them. General Vexthor growled softly. So they were good at making friends. That does not make them special. Many species are capable of diplomacy. But Captain Sornell of the Vorthak Navy shook his head. You still do not understand, General. The humans were not just good at diplomacy, they were essential for it. After they left, how many interspecies conflicts erupted? How many trade agreements collapsed? How many alliances fell apart? The chamber fell silent as the representatives remembered the chaos that had followed humanity's departure. Border disputes, that humans had mediated through their unique blend of diplomacy and implied force, had escalated into decades-long conflicts. Economic relationships that depended on human trade networks had collapsed overnight. Criminal organizations that had been kept in check by human law enforcement had grown into galaxy-spanning threats. Elder Kithara spoke slowly, her voice heavy with memory. We told ourselves that we were safer without them. We said that their violent nature made the galaxy unstable. But the truth is that we were afraid of them not because they were violent, but because they were not violent enough. They had the power to conquer us all, but they chose to protect us instead. That kind of restraint, that kind of choice, terrified us more than any weapon. The memory projector showed one final scene, a human space station orbiting a contested world where 3 different species had territorial claims. Human mediators had established a neutral zone where all 3 species could coexist, sharing resources and knowledge while maintaining their distinct cultures. It had been a model of peaceful cooperation. After the humans left, the 3 species had fought a bitter war that lasted 30 years and left the world uninhabitable. None of them had gotten what they wanted, and all of them had lost something precious that the humans had helped them build. Admiral Quindar turned off the projector and looked around the chamber. This is what we lost when humanity left. Not just their protection, not just their strength, but their ability to help us be better than we were. They saw the best in every species and somehow convinced us to live up to that vision of ourselves. The silence stretched on as each representative contemplated what they had heard. Finally, Elder Kithara spoke the words that everyone was thinking. If the humans are returning, it means the war they fought was ending. Either they won or they lost, or something even worse is coming that forced them to abandon their long campaign. General Vexthor's voice was quieter now, less certain. And if they return, will they still be the same species that left? 300 years of war against creatures that exist beyond reality itself. What would such a conflict do to even the humans? The question hung in the air like a threat, because everyone in the chamber knew the answer. The humans who returned, if they returned, would not be the same ones who had left. The years following humanity's departure became known throughout the galaxy as the Quiet Years. Though quiet was not the right word for what happened, it was more like the silence that follows a symphony, when the music stops, but the echoes still ring in your ears, and you realize how much you had grown accustomed to the sound. On Thornic Prime, the homeworld of the galaxy's most aggressive species, Chancellor Mordak reviewed security reports that would have been unthinkable during the human years. Piracy had increased by 400% along the trade routes that humanity had once protected. The Corvin Syndicate, previously a minor criminal organization that operated in the shadows, had grown into a multi-system threat that commanded fleets larger than some planetary defense forces. The humans had never officially policed the galaxy, but their mere presence had been enough to keep most criminal activity in check. A pirate crew might risk attacking a merchant vessel, but they would never risk the possibility of human retaliation. Human justice was swift, thorough, and absolutely certain. More importantly, it was fair. Pirates who surrendered were given trials and opportunities for rehabilitation. Those who harmed innocents were never seen again. Now, without that invisible shield of human protection, the galaxy's criminals had grown bold. The trade route between the Selenite homeworld and the Zentari colonies had become so dangerous that merchant ships required military escorts just to carry basic supplies. Insurance rates had skyrocketed, and many smaller trading companies had simply gone out of business. Captain Nelvar of the Zentari Defense Force stood on the bridge of his patrol ship, watching helplessly as another merchant vessel burned in the distance. His ship was fast and well-armed, but the pirates had simply jumped to hyperspace before his forces could arrive. The same pattern repeated itself dozens of times each month throughout the galaxy. We used to respond to distress calls. Within minutes, his communications officer reported. Now we are lucky if we arrive in time to rescue survivors. Nelvar nodded grimly. During the human years, their ships had seemed to appear instantly wherever they were needed. Not because they had better technology than everyone else, though their ships were certainly advanced, but because they had positioned themselves strategically throughout the galaxy and maintained constant patrols of the most dangerous regions. But their departure had revealed something that made the Galactic Council deeply uncomfortable. The humans had not just been protecting trade routes and colonies, they had been preventing wars that no one else had even realized were about to start. The Kethmaran border dispute was a perfect example. For 50 years before humanity's departure, the Kethmaran and the Yilthari had maintained an uneasy peace along their shared border. Both species claimed the same 12 star systems. Both had valid historical arguments for their claims, and both had been gradually building up military forces in preparation for an inevitable conflict. Human diplomats had visited both worlds regularly, not to mediate the dispute officially, but simply to maintain relationships with both governments. Captain Amy Watson had made it her personal mission to understand both cultures, learning their languages and studying their histories, until she could argue either side's position with genuine conviction. More importantly, she had made friends on both worlds. When Kethmaran military leaders spoke privately about their plans to seize the disputed systems, they found themselves thinking about Captain Watson's reaction. When Yilthari politicians discussed the economic benefits of controlling the contested trade routes, they remembered Watson's stories about refugees from other wars who had lost everything to political ambition. The humans had never made threats or issued ultimatums. They had simply made it clear through their actions and their relationships that any attack on innocent people would result in human intervention. Not intervention on behalf of one side or the other, but intervention to protect civilians and minimize suffering. After humanity's departure, it took less than 2 years for the Kethmaran-Yilthari War to begin. It lasted 18 years and killed millions on both sides. Neither species achieved their objectives. Both worlds were economically devastated, and the disputed star systems were left uninhabitable by biological weapons that both sides deployed in desperation. Similar conflicts erupted throughout the galaxy. The Selenite succession crisis, the Thornak resource wars, the Zentari colonial rebellion. Wars that human presence had prevented through quiet diplomacy and the implicit threat of intervention. Wars that the Galactic Council was powerless to prevent because they lacked humanity's unique combination of moral authority and military capability. Dr. Yolandra of the Galactic Historical Institute studied these conflicts with growing horror. The pattern was always the same. Complex political situations that had remained stable during the human years suddenly erupted into violence within a few years of their departure. It was as if humanity had been serving as the galaxy's immune system, preventing small problems from becoming large catastrophes. But the economic impact was perhaps even more devastating than the military conflicts. Captain Roy Thompson's merchant vessel New Horizon had maintained trade relationships with 47 different worlds. But his cargo holds had contained more than just commercial goods. He had carried specialized medical equipment to worlds that could not afford it, delivered rare materials needed for critical infrastructure projects, and transported cultural artifacts between species that had no other means of communication. Thompson had also served as an unofficial banker for dozens of smaller worlds. His ship carried currency from 12 different species, and he had maintained exchange rates that were fair to everyone involved. When a Selenite colony needed Thornak metals to repair their life support systems, Thompson would arrange the trade, extend credit if necessary, and ensure that both parties felt they had been treated honestly. After his disappearance, along with all of humanity, these economic networks collapsed overnight. The Selenite colony's life support systems failed, and 3,000 colonists died before emergency supplies could be arranged through official channels. Similar disasters struck throughout the galaxy as the informal economic relationships that humans had maintained simply vanished. The Galactic Council tried to establish formal trade agreements and diplomatic protocols to replace what humanity had provided, but bureaucracy was a poor substitute for personal relationships. A Thornak trader might trust Captain Thompson enough to extend credit for a shipment of rare crystals, but he would never extend the same trust to a faceless council trade commissioner. Professor Zenkelar of the Interspecies Psychology Department at the University of Centralis had spent decades studying humanity's unique role in galactic society. His research revealed something that made the Council's economists deeply uncomfortable. Humans had not just facilitated trade between different species, they had served as emotional and cultural translators. The Thornak, for example, were naturally aggressive and viewed all interactions as potential conflicts to be won or lost. The Selenites were naturally contemplative and viewed all interactions as philosophical discussions about the nature of reality. Under normal circumstances, these two species literally could not understand each other's motivations well enough to negotiate effectively. But humans could understand both perspectives simultaneously. A human diplomat could speak to a Thornak general about honor, strength, and victory while speaking to a Selenite philosopher about wisdom, balance, and harmony. More importantly, the human could help each species understand that the other's approach was not inferior or threatening, just different. Without human translation, interspecies relations became formal, cold, and often hostile. The Thornak interpreted Selenite contemplation as weakness or deception. The Selenites interpreted Thornak directness as brutality or stupidity. Trade agreements that had lasted for generations were canceled over cultural misunderstandings that humans would have resolved with a few conversations. The situation was made worse by the galaxy's growing dependence on technology that humans had helped develop. Dr. Nathan Brooks had not just studied alien psychology. He had designed communication systems that accounted for the different ways that various species processed information. Thornak interfaces used aggressive colors and harsh sounds that motivated quick decisions. Selenite interfaces used soft colors and subtle harmonics that encouraged careful consideration. Human-designed systems could adapt automatically to whoever was using them, presenting information in ways that each species could understand intuitively. After humanity's departure, these systems gradually broke down as other species tried to maintain technology they did not fully understand. Replacement systems designed by individual species worked well for their creators, but were nearly impossible for other species to use effectively. The result was growing isolation between the galaxy's various civilizations. Trade decreased, diplomatic contacts became less frequent, and each species began to focus primarily on their own affairs. The galaxy did not collapse into chaos, but it became a colder, lonelier place where cooperation was rare and trust was even rarer. Council members began to realize that humanity's greatest contribution had not been their military strength or their advanced technology. The first sign appeared in the Outer Rim, in a region of space so remote that only automated survey drones visited it regularly. Survey Drone 77 Alpha transmitted routine sensor readings to the Galactic Survey Office, but buried in the AudioBook data was something that made the technicians on duty stop their normal work and stare at their screens in confusion. A ship had been detected, drifting near the binary star system of Kalis Venth. The ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest Council vessel, but it appeared on sensors as only a faint shadow. Its hull seemed to absorb energy rather than reflecting it, making it nearly invisible except for the strange, gravitational distortions it created in nearby space. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Blake of the Council Defense Force was assigned to investigate the anomaly. Her ship, the CDF Vigilant, was one of the newest vessels in the fleet, equipped with the most advanced sensors available to the Council. But as she approached the mysterious craft, her instruments struggled to provide coherent readings. "The ship is there, but it is also not there," reported her sensor officer, a young Zentari named Kelman. "I am detecting matter, but the readings suggest that the matter exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. This should be impossible." Blake ordered her ship to maintain a safe distance while she studied the mysterious vessel. Its proportions were familiar in a way that made her hearts race with nervous energy. The angular hull design, the placement of what might be weapon emplacements, the overall aesthetic that somehow managed to be both graceful and threatening at the same time. She had seen such designs before, in classified historical records that were supposed to be sealed forever. "Scan for human biosignatures," she ordered quietly. Her crew looked at her in shock. Human biosignatures had been removed from all Council databases centuries ago, and scanning for them was technically illegal under Council regulations. But Blake had been born on a frontier world where the old stories were still told, and she recognized the ship's design from her grandmother's tales of the human years. The scan results were inconclusive but disturbing. The sensors detected organic signatures, but they were unlike anything in the Council's databases. Complex patterns of biological activity that seemed to shift and change even as the instruments tried to analyze them. Life signs that existed, partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. As Blake watched, the mysterious ship simply vanished, not moving away but disappearing as if it had never been there at all. Her sensors showed no energy discharge, no dimensional rift, no trace of the advanced technology that would be needed for such a feat. One moment it was there, the next moment it was not, leaving only empty space and the memory of something impossible. Blake filed her report with the Council Defense Force, classifying it as a routine anomaly investigation, but she also sent a copy to her old instructor at the Defense Academy, Admiral Quindar, with a personal note that contained only 3 words: "They are returning." Similar reports began to arrive from across the galaxy. Trade vessels reported brief sensor contacts with ships that matched no known design, appearing suddenly on their screens before vanishing just as quickly. Colonial outposts detected energy signatures that resembled human technology, but were far more advanced than anything humanity had possessed 3 centuries ago. On the agricultural world of Kepler Prime, colonists began reporting strange encounters. Figures in powered armor would appear briefly in their settlements, walking among the buildings and scanning the area with instruments that no one could identify. The figures were humanoid in shape but moved with inhuman grace, their technology seamlessly integrated with their bodies in ways that suggested centuries of biotechnological advancement. Security cameras captured only glimpses of these visitors. Tall beings in armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, their faces hidden behind masks that might have been technological or might have been organic. They never spoke to the colonists, never made any aggressive moves, but their presence was unmistakably purposeful, as if they were gathering information for some larger plan. The colonial government tried to establish contact, but the armored figures simply ignored all attempts at communication. They would appear without warning, conduct their mysterious surveys, and then vanish as suddenly as they had arrived. The only clue to their identity was their size and proportions, which matched the general physical characteristics of humans. Dr. Feltar of the Xenoarchaeological Institute received the most disturbing report of all. A research team studying ancient ruins on the dead world of Terminus 7 had discovered something that should not have existed. Fresh human footprints in the dust around a monument that had been built to commemorate humanity's disappearance. The footprints were clearly human, showing the distinctive bipedal pattern and the boot treads that human explorers had used throughout their expansion period. But these prints had been made recently, within the past few months according to atmospheric analysis. Someone had been walking around the monument studying it carefully, perhaps reading the inscriptions that had been carved in 17 different languages. Even more disturbing was what the research team found inside the monument itself. The time capsule that had been sealed there 3 centuries ago had been opened, its contents carefully examined and then replaced. Nothing had been stolen or damaged, but someone with advanced technology had bypassed the monument's security systems and studied the artifacts that represented humanity's legacy. The breakthrough came when Captain Rick Martinez appeared aboard the Vorthak patrol vessel, Razor's Edge. The ship was conducting routine border patrol duties near the neutral zone when their sensors detected a massive energy surge. Before they could react, a figure materialized on their bridge without triggering any of their security systems. The crew of the Razor's Edge found themselves staring at something that was unmistakably human, but also clearly something more. Martinez stood nearly 7 feet tall, his body encased in armor that seemed to be grown rather than manufactured. His face was still recognizably human, but his eyes held depths that spoke of experiences no normal mind could contain. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made hardened Vorthak warriors instinctively stand at attention. "I am Captain Rick Martinez of the Human Defense Fleet," he said in perfect Vorthak, his accent flawless despite speaking a language that no human should have been able to learn. "I carry a message for the Galactic Council." The Vorthak captain, Korthak, tried to maintain his composure despite the fear that was coursing through his system. "You're human, but you're also something else. What have your people become?" Martinez smiled, and the expression was both familiar and alien at the same time. "We became what we needed to become to fight a war that no one else could fight. We learned from our enemies, we adapted to their realm, and we paid prices that no species should have to pay. But we never forgot why we were fighting." He paused, and his expression grew serious. "The Devourers are returning. They have been building their strength in the spaces between realities, preparing for a final assault on this dimension. We came back to finish what we started 3 centuries ago." Korthak felt his warrior's instincts warring with his fear. "Why should we believe you? How do we know you are not the threat?" Martinez reached into his armor and withdrew a small device that projected a holographic image. The recording showed Morrison's final message, the same message that Zexai had discovered, on the ancient space station. But this version contained additional footage, scenes of human ships disappearing into dimensional rifts while alien fleets watched from a safe distance. "We kept our promise," Martinez said quietly. "We took the fight to the enemy's home ground, so that the galaxy could remain safe. We have been fighting for 300 years in dimensions where time moves differently, where death has different meanings, where the very concept of existence becomes negotiable. We won that war, but the victory changed us in ways that we cannot undo." The hologram shifted to show images of human ships emerging from tiers in space-time, their hulls bearing the scars of battles fought in impossible places. The vessels were organic-looking amalgamations of technology and something far stranger, as if they had been grown rather than built. "The Devourers learned from us just as we learned from them," Martinez continued. "They adapted to our strategies, our weapons, our methods. Now they are coming back with new forms, new capabilities, new ways to consume reality itself. The old defenses will not work. The old weapons will be useless. Only we can stop them, because only we understand what they have become." Korthak struggled to process what he was hearing. "If this is true, if the Devourers are returning, then why reveal yourselves now? Why not simply begin your preparations in secret?" Martinez's expression grew sad. "Because we are no longer quite human, and we need the galaxy to understand what we have become. We exist partially outside normal reality now, tied to the same dimensions where the Devourers make their home. We can fight them effectively, but we can no longer live among you as we once did." He gestured to his armor, which seemed to shift and flow in response to his emotions. "This is not just protective equipment. It is a containment system designed to keep our altered physiology from affecting normal spacetime." The end began quietly, as the most terrible things often do. On 17 different worlds across the galaxy's rim, children stopped playing and looked up at the sky with expressions of confusion and fear. Animals fell silent in the forests, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Space itself was holding its breath, waiting for something that existed beyond the normal laws of physics to tear through the barriers between dimensions. Admiral Kate Williams stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Vigil, watching reality fracture along the galaxy's edge. Her ship hung in the space between dimensions, existing simultaneously in normal space and in the twisted realm where the Devourers made their home. 300 years of war had taught humanity to navigate these impossible places, but the cost of that knowledge was written in every line of her face. Williams had been 25 when humanity first encountered the Devourers. She was now over 300 years old, her lifespan extended by technologies that the human species had learned from their enemies. Her crew consisted of volunteers who had made the same choice, accepting transformation rather than death. becoming something new rather than letting the galaxy fall to creatures that existed beyond the reach of conventional weapons. Captain Danny, Foster reported from the surface of Selenia Prime, where selenite evacuations were proceeding with desperate efficiency. The crystalline beings moved with their characteristic grace, but their usual philosophical calm had been replaced by primal terror. Even their enlightened minds could sense what was coming, could feel the approaching presence of entities that consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence. Foster's armor was a marvel of biotechnology and dimensional engineering, grown rather than manufactured, responding to his thoughts and emotions like a living extension of his body. He had volunteered for the transformation process knowing that it would make him something no longer entirely human. But the alternative was allowing innocence to face creatures that normal minds could not even comprehend. The children are frightened, he reported to Williams through their quantum communication link. They can sense the devourers even though the attack has not begun yet. How long do we have? Williams consulted instruments that measured time in dimensions where causality operated, according to different rules. Hours in our time stream, but the devourers experience duration differently. They could emerge at any moment or not for days, continue the evacuation and prepare defensive positions. The first tear in reality appeared above the Thornak homeworld, a wound in space-time that bled darkness into normal space. The Thornak defense fleet moved to intercept, their powerful warships armed with the most advanced weapons that conventional technology could provide. Their plasma cannons and fusion missiles struck the emerging devourers with devastating force, but the attacks simply passed through their targets without causing damage. General Marcus Webb materialized alongside the Thornak fleet, his enhanced form protected by armor that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He had become something that could fight the devourers on their own terms, but the transformation had cost him his connection to normal human existence. He could no longer touch another person without risking their safety, could no longer exist in normal space without his containment systems. "Pull your ships back," he commanded the Thornak admiral through their communication systems. "Your weapons cannot harm creatures that exist partially outside reality. We will handle this." The human ships that emerged from dimensional rifts bore little resemblance to the vessels that had departed the galaxy 3 centuries earlier. They were organic-looking amalgamations of technology and something far stranger, grown from materials that had been harvested in battles fought in impossible dimensions. Their hulls pulsed with life. Their weapons channeled forces that conventional physics could not explain. But despite their alien appearance, the tactics remained recognizably human. The enhanced human fleet positioned itself between the devourers and the civilian populations, taking the worst of the enemy assault to protect beings they barely remembered how to communicate with. They had become monsters to fight monsters, but their core motivation remained unchanged. Colonel Alex Turner coordinated ground defense on the agricultural world of Haven, where human colonists had once established thriving communities. The world was now populated by Kethmoran settlers, but Turner's enhanced memory still recalled the names of human families who had lived there centuries ago. He positioned his forces to protect Kethmoran civilians with the same dedication he would have shown to his own species. The devourers that emerged from the dimensional tiers were not the same creatures that humanity had fought 3 centuries earlier. They had learned from their defeats, adapted to human strategies, and developed new forms that combined their reality-consuming abilities with tactical intelligence that made them far more dangerous. But humanity had learned as well. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now existing as a hybrid consciousness distributed across multiple dimensional planes, had spent centuries studying devourer biology and psychology. Her research had revealed the truth that would determine the outcome of the final battle. The devourers cannot be destroyed because they are not truly alive in the way we understand life, she reported to the human command structure through quantum communication links that transcended normal spacetime. They are patterns of consumption given form, concepts of hunger and emptiness that have achieved independent existence. But concepts can be changed. Patterns can be rewritten. Williams understood immediately. Instead of trying to kill creatures that existed beyond death, Humanity would transform them into something else entirely. The weapons that the human ships carried were not designed to destroy the devourers, but to rewrite their fundamental nature, to transform entities of consumption into entities of creation and protection. The battle raged across 12 star systems simultaneously, with human forces fighting in dimensions that normal minds could not perceive. Captain Rick Martinez led boarding actions against devourer vessels, his enhanced physiology allowing him to exist in environments where matter and energy followed alien rules. His team consisted of volunteers who had accepted the most extreme transformations, becoming something barely recognizable as human, but retaining their essential humanity in the choices they made. The tide began to turn when Martinez's team successfully infiltrated the primary Devourer command entity, a creature the size of a small moon that existed across 17 different dimensional planes. Using weapons that humanity had developed during their long exile, they began the process of fundamental transformation, rewriting the creature's basic nature from the inside out. The effect rippled across the Devourer forces like a contagion of change. Creatures that had existed only to consume began to experience new sensations, new purposes, new ways of interacting with reality. Instead of devouring the life force of planets, they began to nurture it, becoming gardeners of existence rather than destroyers. But the transformation was not without cost. Each successful conversion required human operators to sacrifice another piece of their original nature, becoming more alien and less connected to the species they had once been. Martinez felt his last connections to normal humanity dissolve as he completed the primary conversion, his consciousness expanding across dimensions that no unmodified human could survive. Captain Helen Wright, serving as humanity's primary diplomat, with the Galactic Council, watched the battle from the command center on Centralis Prime. Her role was to explain what humanity had become and what their victory would mean for the galaxy's future. She had volunteered for psychological enhancement rather than physical transformation, becoming something that could still communicate with normal beings while understanding the cosmic scope of what humanity had achieved. "The war is ending," she reported to the assembled council representatives. "The devourers are being transformed rather than destroyed, converted into entities that will protect and nurture life instead of consuming it. The galaxy will be safe, but there will be consequences." Elder Kithara of the Selenites asked the question that everyone was thinking. "What has happened to your species? Are you still human?" Wright considered the question carefully, her enhanced mind processing concepts that normal languages could not express. "We are still the same species that chose to protect strangers rather than conquer them, that walked unarmed into hostile territory to make peace, that sacrificed our own safety to shield the innocent. But we are also something new, something that exists partially outside normal reality, something that can fight cosmic-level threats and win." She paused, and her expression grew sad. "We can no longer live among you as we once did. Our enhanced physiology affects space-time in ways that make normal interaction dangerous. We exist in the spaces between dimensions now, tied to the same realms where we fought our long war. We can protect the galaxy, but we cannot rejoin it." The final phase of the battle took place in a dimension where thoughts became physical forces and emotions shaped reality itself. Admiral Williams led the assault on the primary Devourer consciousness, an entity that had existed since the universe was young and had consumed countless galaxies throughout cosmic history.